Inside Story Uganda, real source of political updates. Inside Story Uganda.
Nomukulu Tamale Mirundi.
Kati mbagamba.
Ese.
Nti omuntu alina okuliizoninga. Omuntu ayinza kubaga nti bane muyingire mu bbala munywe oba mulye emmere. Omugezi asooka mubuuza nti sente zogenda kusasula ziriwa. Kyosooka omugezi. Kati nga tetunnayogera oba abeeriveni oba baakolayo. Who has confirmed that Bobi Wine brought in anamadika? Ekyokubiri omuntu ayinza kujja wuwo n'omugamba nti ekidomolo kiraba ekyo banzibye ekidomola ky'amata nti wakikamye muki nti awo nakikamye mu kamyo. You are not a serious person. Bobi Wine bannayuganda tebasobola musondera ssente kugula mmotoka eyo nga n'abaagendanga e London Mayiga yatwalanga abantu waliwo yajjayo ssente. Eki kya bulimba. Kakati Bobi Wine atambulira ku ekyo nga kiwaani ekisoboka. Until we find out, we cannot say. What does the government have? Teina machine zikebera, teina ki ne babalika nti abanange emmotoka ezifaanana bwe zikizaabuze, people are reporting, kale mwene emmotoka tuyimiriza emmotoka ku luguudo neya Bobi Wine nga mutegedde gyeraga. Omwali giyimiriza ne mugiteekako akuuma akalaga nti oba eri amadi kubanga tulina light ne fuulu. Temwali tegedde. Naye population nebeerawo ngeri ku ebyo. Population ya Uganda ebeera ku kintu ekitali solevu. Kakati notunuulira nti mwaga nti mwakoze eddagala lya COVID ne president ali launching eryammwe liriwa. Tulaba lya China libaleese na lya America. Where is yours?
Ate ya launching addagala, ya launching adigezesa.
Ate atya a vaccine.
Ya launching ati litandika okukola. Bakyali mu stage.
Where is yours?
Bakyali mu eyo stage.
Kakati ali lina jadi. Tewali gabba sebo billioni nga 5. N'oyo omukazi omukaddoyi banemba kuba ebifaananyi abantu abo batubye ssente mujjeyo bulaka buku ti ng'oyo omukazi simenya advisor nga mukube ekifaananyi. Yes, we must have a bulaka buku bano bakisaka bano yaliyo
anti eriwa bagiproducingako
akakiiko ka human rights bwe kajja abantu balina data nga bano
nawe bakyakuza mu bya bulaka.
Yes, we should write. I'm documenting.
Kati you document.
Because
naye toleta ebyo bya bulaka book.
Kakati zembagamba ti Bobi Wine oyo azanyira ku nsobi za gavumenti. Aba gavumenti be bamuteekawo ne bamuwa ekibiina ky'obufuzi NUP kyava mu ekibiina ky'NRM. Bwe baali bagenda okukyusa obukulembeze balanga ennaku 14 tewali yabuulira Museveni. Ne badde muwala wa Muwanga ne bamugamba nti agenda kuvuganya Amelia Kyambadde Mawokota koze ekibiina kya wa Muwanga bamuteeka mu monitor. Kati Bobi Wine najja bakusasira ne bamulya mu ssente ne balya ayina factory ayina ki nga tubatunuulidde bwetyo ti akaliro katosompita ninja batta ninja paka omulenzi oyo mwasa omutwe. Mulidde sente zammwe eza COVID temumpaddeko, mulidde z'abakusasira temumpaddeko. Naye bali lwaki abasajja bano banjooganya?
Okuttako nga kwa Mukama.
Nedda lwaki abasajja bano obujozi bwabwe bonna balowooza kubunaabira ku nze?
Nze kyeŋŋamba okuttako oyogera okukoma mu kamwa.
Mbampita ku kakiiko bakijja mu New Vision bakiwandiisa mu Gonda bakiwandiisa mu ki eriyo Gonda tumutadde kakiiko
ebyokutta biveeko.
No,
tobisobola.
Lwaki bajooga?
Ate tobisobola.
Walabyeko kagundi kange akasinza okutunda kati.
Akaki.
Nabadde ndine kasoko nga tukola interview abaana ne bawogana nabadde mbattira mu nnyumba nga njookya live ate kasuku teyaŋŋambye nti oli live
bana waka
okusula obusitu nebamanye nekuwangulamu
ate wabase
nze nkubuulira ndi musajja mukambwe ennyo kaakati ekyo kitegedde nti Bobi Wine as we are speaking today Bobi Wine asobola okukola laleeta nayiwa abantu baguza abantu be babadde bagula sente bakolaki era nja bagunda kasa mugaba sente nga mbakuba yazidde yamwogera kuba mutujoga nnyo abenali abawagira gavumenti tulinga abazza omusango kati baguza wali waguza ekizimbe biliyoni 3 anti sente ziringa njaga abadduse waggulu bananja babatula buli addukira Bobi Wine muwa sente njamu batula nze temumpa enda bangamba buli azizidinanga mwogera nga abantu bamutwala emisinde bakati munabeeramunezo ye bajozi batujoka fe ababakolera tetujagenda mu mpozi naye kuba bali kyemukola nga tekikubanga abantu babategeera buli alidde sebwe bamwate sente nga tukubanga batezogera tobagundya ddala ngaenkola eyo ey'okujoga ababakolera mujoga nnyo ababakoledde kakati nkugamba nti olaba mu Kampala olwaleero nga mwina Bobi Wine kuba ne boogula bano bampuuga baani abo bannamulindi
ne bampuuga balugendedde
tulina kyogenda kufuna baseggona
ne baseggona balugendeddemu
wakalevuuno ne bwobagula
zokoleke Tamale ne bampuuga balugendeddemu
abantu bajja batta
nabo balugendeddemu
yono omwana agamba nti
anti mbuuza
ojja kulaba mpuuga bwadduka n'obukooti namulindyamu bamuleete nga talinnya ononde kalevu bamuleete kalevu bajja muleeta ajja okudduka emisindi kalevu
njagala kumanya ne bampuuga balugendeddemu ekyo nga tokyogerako
eyanyodde enjaga bamulaba sente ziringa njaga luyaguza ekizimba awo ekyengera
ani anti oyogera bangi
tujja kubakuba buli gwe muwa sente ne mulowooza nti ffe temutuwa buli omu nja kumwabya ate society ndi buli omu nja kumwabya nja
kati lutalwapiraawo
yes kakati nkumbagamba nti Bobi Wine eddagala lyesi kugula bano okujja musetokisinga ebigere byebibunya oba omala biseera epolobulemu y'abantu ba Kampala nabaga nti omubaka wa palamenti ava mu Kampala temumutyanga Bobi Wine can cause havoc here waava mu kibuga tewali awamba gavumenti ng'avudde entuŋŋamu nti ali ntuŋŋamu n'alangirira ani amufaako gavumenti ewambirwa wano kakati mwe mwali badde temukyakwata ku mutembeeyi mwali badde temukyakwata ku babodaboda mwali badde temuyingira butale bw'owino Kisaka nalinga nti abalina emitwe eminene baba bagezi nedda mukama sima mutima munda nga nakuba tomanya nali manyi nti abalina amagezi baba banene nedda nalinga nti abalina emitwe eminene baba bagezi bali omanya ekibakubya owino ekibakubya obutale mbw'omwonga gujje nga bataddemu abantu
kakati gwe wali ogamba balina emitwe minene olabira ku gugwo nti munene kuba nze ndaba
ogugwonalinga nti abantu abalina emitwe eminene
ogugwo ndaba mutono tuveewo tugende ku kirala leeta
tulaba wano somaawo ebatandika nti Kampala
in fact
Kampala emitwe eminene baba bagezi nedda nolaba oba bwija oba ki yono ndowooza banaibwa natandika kati bwakola embaga temugendayo bwafiirwa temugendayo
wano tuba tetutandike
ojja mu kyaki nga muddu
Tamale wano tuba awuliza n'ategeera wetutandikira wano Kampala markets ogamba we bantandikira okay Kampala markets kasooke mbabuulira akatabo kano kawandiikibwa omutwe guliko Baganda politicians the politics of wheelbarrow pushers kakati
naye bamweyambise bakasuke naye abaganda bebakozesa tubiteeke mu black book
kambabuulira kambabuulire byongambye nga 3 akatabo ka 218 kakati agamba Kampala markets were sold to private businessmen like many other government noble policies which are abused by the stealing clique. the decision to return them to the vendors was right. The businessmen had imposed the exorbitant rates on the poor vendors. Therefore, President Museveni's intervention was intended to help the poor. President Museveni directed that if the private businessmen had acquired them legally, they should be compensated. Nobody at this stage opposed compensation. However, after President Museveni's directive, the thieves raised their ugly heads to steal public funds as they usually do. Abusing a presidential directive cannot be blamed on the president. This was an election period. The thieves, as usual, came up with a plan to steal billions of money. They knew very well that government the world over are sensitive during election periods. This is when they brought up the compensation demands. The thieves penetrated the market vendors by pouring money into the groups. The money-created groups started inciting the gullible vendors, those with the stalls, that Museveni was a liar. That if he was honest, why didn't he give the vendors land titles for the markets? They also incited the vendors that Museveni's directive was an election gimmick intended to hoodwink the voters, that after the election Museveni would renegade on the directive and offer. Armed with lies, the vendors started staging riots, especially those operations on the Kiseka market. Many of the thugs were not known in these markets. They were actually hired. Lumpens from places like Kalere, Kampala was put on high tension. The unsuspecting members of public believed in what these hired mercenaries were saying. Oba Museveni obutale yabutuwa lwaki tabawa kyapa. If Museveni's directive is genuine, why doesn't he give us land titles for these markets? This was their rallying cry. Matters were worsened by the then Kampala Mayor Nasa Sebagala. He said that Museveni had no powers to give away markets. In one of my responses on this matter, I compared Alhaji Nasa Ntege Sebagala to a school watchman who cannot bar a student from joining the school after being cleared by the headmaster. I explained to the vendors that land in Kampala on which the markets were constructed belonged to the central government, and that Haji Sebagala was a mere watchman, not the owner of the land. Therefore, Sebagala could not stop this directive. Therefore, considering the situation that prevailed then, the government negotiators were in a very weak position. This is how people like Basajja Balaba, Kano Mujenyi, and others got their billions. However, there are two important factors on this issue that shows that this matter was important. Parliament instituted a committee headed by the current Deputy Speaker, Jacob Olanya. This therefore reveals the following. Number one, that Saida and Kidu Makuya did not play any role in the creation of this market problem that led to their resignation. They were not in Kampala City Council, which sold the markets. In fact, the two ministers were not the architects of the deal that has ruined their political careers. If the deal was a building under construction, the two ministers' role would be reduced to wheelbarrow pushers.
Nti oyo Kisaka bamafia be bamuleta mu Kampala, naye bamafia abo be bakozesa musisi. Ono yiteyinza kulowooza nali manyi nti ab'emitwe eminene baba bagezi nedda, kubanga amanyi ekyatwala musisi. Tumwebaze ye wali akyali minister. Kakati oyo, look at your window market. I've explained. The president yali ali awo basebanakizo ne batandika okutunda obutale ne tax parks. Obutale bwabeerangamu abagoza ba city council. Kakati bano basebana ba businessmen ne bajja ne baga nti obutale tubutendalinga abantu. A tenderer does not have any investment in the market. A tenderer just calculates the stores n'abala sente ze ne interest ye naki. Ekitegeeza ba vendors babonaabona nnyo ne tax park bwekyali. Tax park se council yajjangamu $5 million. era bwe wayingiranga waliwo omusajja nga mukambwe bamuyita Mayanja n'omuvuka yali mweru muwanvu bwati nga basoloza ebinusu utodde okutendalinga paaka eyo baali balwana ne UNATU gundi negamba bitandise naga nti no mutendalinge utodde netendalinga milioni 13 the first amount of money era nebajja ne baziyola wo ne babba ne bavuwaza abantu Bobi Wine n'abayoola bebakuba amayinja abo bebakuba amayinja kati ate tubadde tulinayo omukyalo omulala omujooze nnyo oyo yabadde aleese basi simanyi nkaaga era naye bamuwenga sente leeta maama leeta kufukamiridde leeta oli okola bejjooguli bwe bakutwala n'ebikoyi nga biri waggulu you are inciting the population sirabanga gavumenti yetyabira kalimbuuka all of these organized groups Utoda was headed by an NRM man Kayongo is an advisor on the president Onomake all are your people no you busuma obubbi obulowooza okutunda ettaka eyo wino bamutunda kakati babagamba president yabalagire bateekawo akakiiko kokolanya nakasero balinda kyapa kya city council owino balinda kyapa kya city council where does Kisaka get power Museveni atulaga neddo lwaki sigwolagira kati namugwanya awunya namugwanya yekwesa awunya bebale why do I attack you are creating a trouble for us we don't want people to join riots organized by Bobi Wine but for you because you are Bobi Wine's supporters you are creating a mass President Museveni yalagira n'agamba if there is a problem in the market and you want to organize elections to change leaders, go to the electoral commission, let the electoral commission come, register the vendors and organize elections. Uyu Kisaka aleta bayaji. Nabaga nti mu Kampala abayine emmotoka tebawera 10 eza taxi. Buli omwasimbe mayamba la ine emmotoka ngajijjawo. How can taxi drivers cannot Boba agenze dda kunoonya ssente
naye Kisaka gw'ogamba bino byonna abisanzeewo
anti nkubuulira nga president naye singa babaleeta ne babakolako n'ebyensonyi abakazi abo kuba abakazi bajooze nnyo
kati president directive gye bagamba teyakirisa
gwe lwaki obeera roboti
anti directive ya president egamba etya
ebintu bibiri the Owino people and Nakasero bought land from Kampala City Council which is their land. They are waiting titles. Also, Owino mulimu ekibiina kya Kayongo ekigatta abasuubuzi. You cannot just come and sweep away Kayongo. The president directed that you call register the vendors. N'emidaala gyabwe. Tumulabeki oyo Kisaka bamujja wali kwenaleero kujja kubabbira ssente kukuliyetinga trouble. Tetujja kukkiriza mukazi gwe kuliyetinga trouble mu Kampala. Why do you hide behind Museveni? Museveni is a directive nina mugwanya awunya Museveni is a directive nga Museveni bwe yalagira Museveni cannot antagonize and organize group Museveni wants someone kakati kati oyo omukazi ayagala ne banne bajje mbwe emyonga bajibbe mulimu nakalema mulimu baani mulimu abo
kati ye president ali luddawa okugaana directive eyo
bagende bampabiremu boyo omukazi Kisaka bamudduse emisinde wano kubanze nkugambe there are two issues Nakasero they are waiting for land titles Owino bakwata ettaka lyabwe ne balitwala mu banka ne balisinga ne baguza city council kakati mukimutamanyi abo bakisaka bafere do you know that you are going to pay Kayongo's organization money all of this time you got their money
basaba no trillion
yes.
Oba 1.5
oyo omukazi mufere kati akolera Kayongo
compensation gye basaba eri mu trillion
yes ne kati agasikizi gajja naye mukwano gwange nti oyinza okugaana okusasula ssente si gwe government valiwo parliament cannot stop any payment if there is fraud auditor general or the IGG Parliament has no powers at all. Kyenkusomedde wano nti basajja balaba bamugamba basajja balaba yali yagende wa government valiwa namuwa billions 24 bagamba nti yali government valiwa mu kiseera ekyo yali gondi basajja balaba nga amukubiddeyo naye n'amulinda kati basajja balaba had two options to go to court or to if you don't agree with the amount of money that has given to you by the government of you go to court. There are two institutions. Kati basajja balaba yasala amagezi n'agenda ewa Kabasi n'awandiika ebbaluwa ng'agiwandiikira Mr. Finance Aida Bumba. Omusajja ono basajja balaba bawandiikidde President nga mugambwamuwa ssente entono. Naye bwe mubanga muyina amakubo ge muyinza omuyamba mu muyambi n'ateekako Kabasi for President, bano abaganda babiri Saida Bumba ne Kiddo Makubuya balowooza nti President is instructionist. Ne baba basajja balaba biliyoni bakikumi abiri mu nnya babagoba. Ndi basajja balaba return the money. Basajja balaba sente yazikomyawo. When these people were forced to resign, how much money was he supposed to get? One would have gone to court. Nekino bwe kiri. Kati you are creating trouble, more trouble for yourselves. Nti bana abasajja kati Dodo omanyi nti Dodo agenda kubakolamu sente zitabangawo. Dodo says the church said in court they are not interested in the church. I bow to the church.
The land.
Church sijagalawo. Kakati yo namugwanya yeche yakoze namuganza yagenze mu katundu aka forceful acquisition. Forceful acquisition kasokiriza nti ettaka lyange nga bwe mukiriza nti ettaka lya kikyonjo nga nzire mu kooti nga mpaaba newola sente nga ngenda kuzimba wano kalina 12. Give me the money, give me the interest. Kuba tebavaliwenga ttaka atolo. Waliwo punitive good. Nti ever since you demolished that church, you put this man in prison in Dodo and you have not allowed him to access his land. Mugenda kusasula buwanana. Nobody is helping you. Abo bali mu state council bafere mutugenda kuba ennyumba ya hamu. Tugenda kuba ennyumba ya kayengoji kubotya. Teina gondi plans. Amazzi bagarayizinze. Waliwo ebizinga ebiriiriddwa global warming. Munyanja omuwalimu ekizimbe nga bakiyita Nkuze muleke Victoria. Amazzi garayizinga ne gakirya. Who came there first? Bahamu bazimba floating building. Waliwo ekisejja mu sekonso nga kirina omutwe gulinga engoma nga kyagala ssente. Era kyekyajja bwekigenda kuba nnyumba ya hamu kibakwatirawo ku gundi ewa Dodo n'entwe zakyo n'ebitwe ebiri mu city council. So we are losing money. The Kisakaza mafias, they are creating trouble for us. Separate. The president directed that if we want to change leadership in the market or the tax park, go to the electoral commission, register the members to vote. Tojobuzi nomukanya yekukumi ono mukamwana wobote yekukumi badidiri no hanti gidogo yete katubakulire katukule black book akantu kanukana agajoga abantu agatabanye ekibuga abantu ne batakola akantu ako tukavunane je bujja ngabakakozesa baddusi kati somakana twagala tukakwatiga akantu gano ngabakakozesa baddusi
Kano the invisible hand yono wa mwaka gwa 2012 ogw'omusanvu kafuluma
Kampala Kampala a victim of a foolish spirit of a spirit syndrome. Never got to have a VCS even. Never got to a minister of Kampala, Navali Kampala, Pakolangi VCS even. Gallows into Vajakuza. One of a gum, all about one. When never got to a minister of Kampala.
Wembansoka one kana katabo Kampala, a victim of foolish spirit syndrome, homosexual couple, Jack and John. Omutwe bwe gugamba neddiba kuliko ebifaananyi by'abasiyazi. When are you conceiving? Jack yabuuza John. John n'amuddamu, we have been in marriage for 5 years. Let us have sex every day so that I can conceive. Kyategeeza. Kakati ongambye esomero, for example, wano ku muko gwokubiri agamba, for example, the late John Garanga used ati we ngambye, for example. Agamba nti okay, eno no ndoza yegundi yentandikwa yako. iringa yandibadde nga preamble ya a fool is described as a person who does the same thing again and again, expecting different results. After reading the above presentation and submission, I now need to go to the title of my book, Kampala City, The Foolish Spirit Syndrome. Psychologists tell us that a fool is a person who does the same thing over again and again, expecting different results. This is why I conclude by saying the ministers of Kampala have a fool's spirit hanging around in their office. Like any other fool, they are repeating the same things, expecting results.
Different results.
In my book, Ugandan Soccer, it is for the game. Kakati tugenze kano invisible hand. The invisible hand.
The same thing again and again, expecting to get a different result. That is a fool.
Kakati wano mu invisible hand.
The same thing again and again. It was somehow we kept
kati kano kafuluma 2:12 12 ka 2:12 future will exonerate me. Okay, gamba bwati ongambye ntandike wano. In other countries, the media sets the agenda and hence shapes public opinion. Agenda setting empowers the media to identify the most important topics to be discussed by the society. Such a media must be credible to influence society. In Uganda, it is money which determines what is discussed by the media and hence its output. Musisi's undoing was her open support from the president. This created two problems for her. Number one, she could not listen to advice from anybody, however important it was. She was only answerable to the president, and she did not hesitate to invoke the president's name to ward off her enemies originally. This attracted the president's enemies within the government to her to undermine the Museveni through Musisi's directives without detection. It was therefore not a mistake for people to attribute Musisi's mistakes to Museveni. For them, it was not Musisi who was chasing away the hawkers from the city, it was Museveni. Musisi was not demolishing their houses, that this was a directive from Museveni. Musisi was not responsible for disorganizing markets, no, it was Museveni himself. This trick worked very well for the victims of Musisi's policies, blamed Museveni for their plight. Interestingly, Musisi wrongly believed that saying that she was implementing Museveni's policies in Kampala was helping her, but helped Museveni's enemies. She usually bragged that whatever she does or did in Kampala was discussed with the president before it was implemented. Museveni's political enemies, both in government and outside, took advantage of Musisi's political blunders. Finally, ever since it was decided that the central government would take over Kampala, the two fighting groups in the government started scheming to outsmart each other. The reason for this is that they had discovered that many leases in the city had expired. However, some of the land had been occupied. They organized groups like markets and taxi parks. These were the most marketable land in terms of value. With more investors looking for land, grabbing those expired leases looked very attractive. They would sell this grabbed land to the government at higher or exorbitant prices. This is why compensation took center stage. The government could be duped into paying huge amounts for this land to give it to investors. The scheming started by ousting the town clerk, Segona. He was arrested and charged with fraud. Segane had been targeted by the stealing group because before joining local government, he was a senior ISO operative. Such a person could not be trusted by the stealing group in government who wanted to grab all land. Segane's mistake was to put city council funds from the Ministry of Local Government on personal accounts. The stealing group enticed him into a trap and Segane failed to realize the trick. It started with the Uganda Revenue Authority, which took control of council accounts for ostensibly for non-payment of Kampala taxes. This is the time when the Minister of Local Government released the 1 billion to Kampala City Council. Why do you release money to a council without operating accounts? Why was it released at this time when KCC could not access its accounts? Why did the Minister of Local Government decide to pay KCC in cash? Because a check signed in KCC names could not be cashed on an individual account. This was how Segane was eagerly swallowed. Segane was later acquitted, but the job had already gone and his reputation damaged. He was replaced by Kijambu, who was also trapped. All the town clerks who could not play ball with the grabbers were removed in row, but the invisible hand that was behind their sacking remained in hiding. The invisible hand used the Haji Sebagala as their foot soldier, which the stealing group normally does. They use Baganda or another tribesman to fight their proxy wars against their fellow tribes. Sebagala was used to fight fellow Baganda. The group that wanted to take over Kampala took advantage of the standoff between Sebagala and Kijambu by siding with Sebagala, promising him free acquisition of the house. It was Haji Sebagala who fought their war like a hunting dog. Sebagala plotted and kicked out Kijambu, who was replaced by the short-lived Nama Werere, without realizing that he was a hunting dog for the stealing group. He did not get the house he wanted to grab. His osters were also interested in it. The groups that were scheming did not want Namawerere. He had worked in Mbarara, and experience shows that such people who previously worked in Mbarara have access to Rwakatura and hence to the president. These people are considered as Museveni's agents who report direct to him as spies in their new assignments. Such fellows cannot be trusted. They can leak the information to the president. This is why Museveni's supporters are targeted by the stealing group. The stealing group targeted Namayanja, Sebagala's deputy, who was likely to become the new mayor. Namayanja was not trusted by any of the two schemes groups. She was given financial assistance to relocate to Bukoto East to defeat Alintuma Nsambu. Nsambu was rigged out by a team from the Electoral Commission to pave way for Florence Namayanja. Namayanja's exit paved the way for the group to grab Kampala by the stealing group. The group opposed to Mbabazi wanted Elias Lukwago, Mike Mabike, forcing the latter to lose interest in the parliamentary elections. His constituency was later taken by Omulangira Simbwa. Mabike did not defend his seat with the backing of the stealing group. Mabike wrongly believed that the mayorship was a walkover. This explains why Peter Sematimba lost the mayorship. Sematimba was undermined by a rival NRM faction for two reasons. Number one, Sematimba, like Namawerere, could access State House in case he was subjected to pressure by one of the scheming groups. Sematimba had composed the NRM national anthem and appeared to be close to the president, whom he usually referred to as Nanyini Sente, the owner of money in Uganda. He was a known supporter of one of the leaders of the two rival groups. Sensing that in case both Lukwago and Mabike competed against Sematimba, he would decisively defeat them. They turned the fire to Lukwago, arguing that he lacked academic qualifications, which failed miserably. Lukwago allies in the judiciary maintained that he had the papers. However, Lukwago lacked campaign funds, and this explains why on election day he did not have representatives on 1,000 polling stations. It was because of this reason that Nambos brought people from Mukono to act as Lukwago's representatives. These were volunteers because Lukwago was a pauper. However, the group that did not want Sematimba leaked valuable information to the Lukwago group through Segona that some ballot boxes had been stuffed. The boxes that had already been sent to several polling stations were impounded by the police, which embarrassed the NRM. This is what forced the commission, which itself is influenced by one of the fighting groups in government, to suspend the election in the middle of the exercise. Sematimba was leading with a very big margin. The stealing group, which wanted to grab Kampala, celebrated victory over Peter Sematimba. This gave two political blows to Sematimba. One, he was exposed as an election thief. However, he did not participate in the planning and execution of the ballot stuffing exercise. It was done by some of his campaigners who had stolen the money for the campaigning and hoped to win by rigging. The stealing group registered another victory without being exposed. Most importantly, the president had won by a clear majority in this clean election. This Sematimba scandal could be utilized by the opposition to dent the president's victory. This affected Sematimba's political career. The president could not tolerate this indiscipline from a candidate sponsored by his political party. Another victory for the thieves against Sematimba. Musisi follows into invisible hand mechanism. Okay. If the president appointed Musisi to clean and reorganize the city, the rival groups in his government had a different role for her. Their mission was to grab land and had nothing to do with the cleanliness in the city. Why are the two groups? Why did the two groups want to grab everything on site? The matter is simple. They have a wrong perception about the role of money in politics and democratic governance. They have exaggerated the role of money in a poor society, which attributes its poverty or plight on corruption and bad government, not economic policies. They are aware that the poor Ugandans believe that in order to overcome this poverty, there should be a change in leadership. The rivaling groups, therefore, wrongly believe that they will control Uganda's politics by money. You can buy members of the NRM Delegates Conference and kick out Museveni. You can use stinking wealth to control Parliament and NRM leaders at all levels. They can influence Parliament by buying MPs to impeach the president. They also invested heavily in turning the media in Uganda to target the president as solely responsible for the current woes. They can influence and control the media by using their money. They have partly succeeded to influence the media, including government media outlets. Some government media outlets serve the president's enemies, not himself. Money has helped them to influence the Electoral Commission. It has helped them to sustain factions within the ruling party. Money has helped them to win elections for themselves and political allies, not to campaign for the president. They have established strong networks for themselves. They can influence church sermons by buying off religious leaders. They control the media. They have also realized that Museveni's biggest weakness is his attitude towards money politics. Museveni does not believe in money politics and checkbook journalism. In fact, if you want to undermine the president, use money politics and checkbook journalism. After the elections and the removal of Professor Gilbert Bukenya, the rivalry in government intensified. They looked at this election as Museveni's last lap. With the revolutions of North Africa, the demise of Muammar Gaddafi sent shivers into the spines of the two groups. They feared to allow a situation that sweeps them from power with Museveni. They wanted to sacrifice Museveni and retain power and protect their wealth. They wrongly looked at Museveni as a political liability who should be removed in order to cool the rising tempers from Ugandans. This would provide them with what we call political socialization, where a ruling group does not lose power at once or surgical operation. You only remove the president. However, they overlooked four important factors. Ugandans know the thieves, and therefore members of the stealing group cannot remove Museveni and retain power. It will just spark off a revolution against themselves, and they will lose. what they jealously want to protect and retain. In fact, Ugandans want Museveni to deal with the thieves, not the thieves to deal with Museveni. In this primitive acquisition of wealth, the stealing group has left a trail leading to their homes. Ugandans know who has stolen what. Ugandans are only encouraging the stealing group to overthrow Museveni. If they succeed, this would weaken them like Paul Mwanga or Body Scenario. After removing Museveni, Ugandans will grab the thieves like grasshoppers and kill them. In villages, the people follow up the trail to capture the village thief. Therefore, Ugandans know who is stealing from them and what has been stolen. No trail leads to Museveni. Museveni has not stolen anything from the public. He is always on the side of the peasants. The stealing group has tried to heap everything on Museveni, which has failed because the trails left behind by the thieves do not lead to Museveni's home. 2. The problem with the two groups is that they have failed to create permanent allies. You cannot create permanent allies by using money. Permanent allies are based on ideology, not money. Otherwise, why do people get married instead of relying on prostitutes? Also, they use people and dump them once the mission is over. They do not spare businesses, including those of their allies. They worship one God, and this God is money. They are inward-looking, considering members of their families. Unlike the president who helps Ugandans through universal programs, the stealing group wants to grab from the population, believing that they are inciting the population against the president. They use crude methods to grab businesses. Finally, they cannot trust anybody apart from themselves to protect their interests. Call it stinking wealthy in a post-Museveni era. This means that it is only a member from their own group who can be trusted with protecting their wealthy. Since they have stolen from the people who will reclaim their wealthy anytime, they fear a situation that removes them from political influence. This is a grave mistake and miscalculation. No political group can ensure that it will control the politics of a country perpetually. The Italian mafias tried this and failed. Drug traffickers in Latin America also failed. It will be like saying that it is only your wife in the world who is capable of cooking your meals. What will happen if she dies? Politics rotates around alliances. In my book, A Marriage Based on Witchcraft, I pointed out that unlike in Kenya, where the colonial government left assets to the ruling class to grab, in Uganda, the stealing group is grabbing from the population. Stealing from the population is not sustainable. It's like a bomb which will explode with devastating impact anytime. It's not sustainable. Ladies and gentlemen, stealing of markets, taxi parks, evicting people from their bibanjas will explode very soon. It would have exploded long ago if the president did not put in place alleviating measures like UPE, USE, and Prosperity for All, and stringent measures against massive evictions. Therefore, it's not surprising that Musisi became a tool of the stealing group, well knowing or by accident. She ended up operating on their instructions. Those of us who look at things critically, we see evidence of traits of the stealing group in her decisions and their implementation. For example, eviction of General Tinyefunza from the house. It was not done to recover the house for KCCA. No, it was intended to give the house to a member of the stealing group. Biri 18 rather biri 12 biri 12
I predicted what is happening now.
Tukomye wano decongesting Kampala.
Yes, katika somoka la ono omukazi kisaka byako bano babikola.
So nga tumaliriza mu bufunze munanga uli
the intention ba mafia be babikola nti as this woman, if this woman has problems in Owino, na Rebecca bukedda kafekete nga kabukedde. sente za Kayongo zibuze. What about sente za Museveni zeyawaayo okugula radio ne TV? Can you compare this to this? Waliwo omukazi omweru ali mu win bamuwe miliyoni 10 nga bivudde mu State House. Yagamba mbu abemundu bajja ne bamutwala mu bank n'abawa ku 15. Why don't you mention this money which did not go to Kayongo? Nigwe nokkiriza ne bakozesa nga hunting dog. Toilet tujikiriza toilet paper bagikozesa n'endala eriwo n'etayomba. They have no brains. Why don't you find out what went wrong with the Musisi? Musiba amukaba yetu mwebaze n'omutwe gwe wali eyagula kana akatali akebiti bilioni 18. Tulifuna government litunda obuntu bwatu mwebaze n'atasigaza na kajiko mu nju kana akatali okalaba bakagula bilioni 18. But is Musisi here? Si adduka nona ajja kudduka no nikisaka ajja kudduka
Musisi yaguduka Musisi yafuna bufumu
ate yafuna wa
yafuna mulimu
president yaganda omusee kyamuduso kimanyi president alambula Kampala agenda okulanga bamugandi wayi olwo president kubanga oyo tumwana tumwebaze yasanga besi ye mukaluka 211 atuwangudde n'obulungu 500. Omwana oyo bwe yajja n'okufukula kwe n'afukula Kampala omanya ekyaddirira besi ne Musisi besi yatukubya ne difference ya 17,000. Kati twafunye mu bumeka Museveni yafunye mu bumeka kati twafunye mu bumeka. Tumwebaze yagenda okukwata Kampala nga bakansalazi ba Kampala bonna bayenaalemu yaleka abo be bantu ba Museveni yanereekamu abo abaana banereekamu kano entwe pusi yagenda nejja that man no president asuka nekayina kyekayina nka kubye namba mazeo tekayina mulimo nakatabo kako kagwa naki ate obusajja bwange buli obutambalanga banga nti kati tukyatawana nabo bali bagenda kutta nti kati raddo tujikubanga tanava waka ekyokubiri tie kasaba kuddamu okutawaanya kambagala ekizozi wansi akabuto kazimbe bakube entwasi nga mu kifo kyogenda mutoyi bebajjagala kasajja kangi nti katusibe ekizozi
Tamale
okuddamu okwereegamu tusibe ekizozi kati bajja kusiba kabasiba omuntu kwekizozi ku bulenzi obwo akabuto kazimbe kakube entwasi nga mu kifo kyogenda mutoyi yebajjagala bwebajjagaza njabba malamu akajanja akasajja kagambye nedda kajja mu kibuga bino nekangamba kalaba ababasekanso nga bayiwa ebinyebwa by'omwana nekanga nti abo balalu tyasebo si balalu nti basirikale basirekanso ne nzeeko omu ku bazzukulu bange ajenabyo kaŋŋamba naye ŋambeku ku muzzukulu wange omu buno butambala nga ttobuno naye nzijeko ne muzzukulu wange omu bayiwe ku binyeeba by'empekemu balabe
lwaki tewamugamba nti
naye kati bwaŋŋambye nti kasaba kuddamu tugala ekizozi kabasibe ekizozi wano
ne baggulawa
omuntu mu kifo kyogenda mutoyi nga yebajjagala bwebajjagala